Okay. Says everyone can see my screen now. And if I could get some nods or thumbs up, you are seeing the first screen indicating we are in February and you have logged in to the Anchorage Society for Human Resource Management. We're glad to see you here today. And this has been a very large crowd who has gathered to hear our speaker. So we're going to begin with a few announcements and buy a little time for you to network in the chat while we let you know what's coming up. We will then turn it over to our speaker, and as he finishes, don't leave us yet. We have a few last things to do, including we're going to try to do a virtual selection for a door prize. And so right to the end, there's going to be some good materials, but we promise to get you offline and back into your other world at 1 o'clock. As we get started, I can start getting my slides to come forward. This would be a really great thing. We want to remind you that that chat is not only for you to be asking your questions, but also to chat with one another. So please put your name in there and maybe a hello. That will also make sure that we count you as present for your continuing education credits. And we always give you a question or two, so that if you don't know what else to say, you could be chatting a little bit about what's one HR question that's on your mind today? Is it about issues or laws or policies or challenges? And alternatively, if that doesn't get your juices running, what about telling us a topic that you would like ASHRM to use for one of our upcoming presentations? We've got half of the year booked, but we've got a few more dates where we might have something that is really needed for you. So I want to begin by having you get to know some of your board members. These two people will be interacting with you on a regular basis here. Now, Desiree, or Des as we call her, I hope that she's online this morning and I cannot see everyone. So Des, if you're there, say hello. Well, if she's not here now, Desiree is on the workforce readiness team, and she's our coordinator with ASD, with the school district. So she is organizing things for youth and schools. As you may recall from last fall, we did a lot of mock interviews and some resume reviews. And I know that Des is working with the schools to see what we can do along those lines and maybe other things for the youth this spring. So you don't have to be an expert in interviewing. You don't have to be an expert in reviewing resumes to take part in that. All you need to do is say, I've got 15 minutes minimum. And she will work with you to either do it online with a student or maybe do it in the schools. On the right, you see Ashley Schreiner. And Ashley, I hope you're here because I'm about to call on you to say a few words. Ashley is one of our newest members, and she is teaming with Daryl in our area of diversity and inclusion. It's a mighty hot topic right now, but they are working to be sure that we hold true to the values of belonging, of inclusion, and still work within the new way of thinking about how do we do the right thing in our workplaces regarding diversity. So Ashley, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I'm going to go to your slide. Will you give us a bit of information about Black History Month?
Yeah, so it's Black History Month, and Black History Month is a time where we get to honor the legacy of Black individuals who have shaped history, culture, and the society. As we reflect on the past, we also embrace the present and commit to building a more inclusive and equitable for our community and the generations to come. So today, I want to focus on honoring a remarkable trailblazer. So on the screen, we have Mahala Ashley Dickerson. She was born in 1912 in Alabama. She moved to Alaska and became the first Black woman admitted to the Alaska Bar in 1959. Mahala fought for fair housing, equal pay, and anti-discrimination laws, and she became the first Black president of the National Association for Women's Lawyers. So why does this matter today? Her efforts for diversity in laws and equal rights lives on. Her story is a reminder that that breaking barriers creates opportunities for others. So let's honor her legacy by continuing to advocate for justice, fairness, and inclusion. And then I will close this in her own words. Be true to yourself, be honest, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right.
Thank you, Ashley. It's a
Yeah,
good reminder and so much legacy that we can all follow that leadership. I'm glad that you added that quote. Okay, as we move forward, let me remind you that we have the certification course opening the beginning of March. And if you've been thinking about getting your SHRM certification to individualize yourself, to make you more distinct, to tell others that you have met a national standard for knowledge and skills in the human resource profession, this is your opportunity to prepare for that exam. Not only that, ASHRM has a certification scholarship. You can see on the screen an image from our website that if you go to the ASHRM website and click on this, you've got just a few days to apply for that scholarship and to get signed up for the spring course. You'll have 19 training sessions and the opportunity to pick the brains of 4 or 5 leaders in our community who are certified as ASHRM certification prep course instructors. So we really want to make sure that you're aware of that and you're thinking about investing in yourself. What are you doing to really ascertain your level of skill and to have those initials after your name? It's kind of like being in accounting. We know many accountants, but we know fewer CPAs. We know many HR professionals and fewer of those who are accredited with this award at the CP or the SCP level. And I want to indicate to you once again that the chat is open. This is an opportunity to share ideas, to let us know in there, are you hunting right now? Or are you looking for a job yourself? You might be hunting to hire someone in your HR department or elsewhere in your company. Please put that in the chat and let us be ready to share it with one another because there's nothing like this network for getting the word out. I also want to tell you upcoming, we have the career management workshop. This is a almost full day workshop on a Saturday, and it is targeted to anyone who is looking out for their own career. So that may be you. I find that my friends in HR are probably the worst about really investing in themselves and thinking, what do I do next? How do I grow? How to become more evident in my company as someone who's on the strategic level. And so we want to invite you as HR professionals, and we would like you to invite your friends, your family, people in the community, members of the military, anyone who is looking to be wiser and stronger on managing their career. So this is not just for job seekers. Maybe you want to be right where you are and prepare for a promotion. Or maybe you know someone who has been out of the workforce and is looking to come back. Share the word. It's on our events page. It's available on the ASHRM site. Now, today we've got an excellent speaker, and I'm going to turn this over to Ben to do an introduction. Ben?
Thank you, Mary. I am really happy that we have Dr. Rob Leon here to speak to us today. Dr. Rob is a seasoned expert in human resource development and organizational behavior. He has 20 years of experience fostering workplace cultures that align with organizational goals and employee well-being. He is a professor at Idaho State University, where he's taught and mentored the next generation of leaders in human resource development while consulting business owners, executives, and community leaders, all in order to create a human-centric, sustainable system and systems that enhance employee performance and organizational success. He's a great speaker. He's committed to transforming workplace environments through people-first solutions. His consultancy, Black River Performance Management, helps organizations improve leadership practices, optimize team performance, and address complex organizational challenges. Rob's approach is built on a deep understanding of the psychology of work, human behavior, and relationship development, which enables him to offer strategic, evidence-based solutions that drive measurable results. Rob's work is guided by the belief that work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. He's applied this philosophy to organizations across various industries, including nonprofits, education, business development, and many more. Through his expertise, Rob helps organizations build sustainable, thriving teams and a workplace culture that supports long-term growth. Outside of that, Rob enjoys fly fishing, mountain biking, and traveling, passions that reflect his love for exploration, growth, and connection. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Rob.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that introduction. I am going to swap some screens now, so bear with me for 1 minute. Let's see. Oh, share first.
While you're swapping screens, let me remind everyone to say hello in the chat. That will let us know that you're here and give you credit for attending today. And use it as an opportunity to not only comment on what you're hearing, but to network with one another.
All right. Do we see a couple heads on the screen?
We
Give me a
do.
nod, thumbs up. Okay, good. I have it in order. Thank you for the kind introduction. And just real quick, from my point of clarification, what is my stop time?
Ben, are you managing that?
It depends on how much time you would like at the end. The end of the presentation is going to be at 12:30, right?
Well, 11:45 would be about the time, Rob, that you start winding down. We need
Okay.
about 10 minutes right there at the end. And like Ben said, if you're getting a lot of questions and opportunity to interact, use that fully. I can talk really fast if we have to go through that last little bit at super speed.
So we're thinking 12:15, do the 2 hour time um, the 2 hour time difference, 2:15. I'm just looking at my calendar right here, so I'm just trying to make sure that I value everyone's time. All right, so thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. Some of you that weren't here when we first started, I actually just got back from Anchorage on Sunday, and we had a wonderful trip. I was so happy that it was warmer there, and there weren't as many snowstorms while I was there as it was back at my home where I'm at now on today's snowstorm day. So, anyways, so as Ben mentioned, I focus on organizations and I focus on what it takes to create compassionate, high-performing organizations. And we're just not focusing on high-performing people. We hear high potential, high performers a lot as we talk about organizational stuff. Instead, what we believe, and my wife is on here, Angie, somewhere just kind of listening along. We believe that organization has so much potential, and the people in the organization, in many instances, are jewels or gems that just need to be dust off, polished up, and given the space to shine. And so, what I'm going to share with you today is one model out of our toolkit that we've developed. That my goal is that you can directly apply it to your life, your work experiences, as well. If you think about it, would this be of value to the people on your teams? How might it influence how they make decisions and move forward? Right? Let's hit the button. Here we go. Okay, so now we're rock and rolling. So, how we talk about stuff versus the reality of the situation. And if you've ever read, say, a self-help book or a leadership book or attended or listened to a podcast or attended a conference, you might be in that conference. It's a 45-minute session on managing change, something that's of interest to you, and they share their successes. Like in the book, they say what they did, and here's the formula for greatness. And all you need to do is go out and apply it. And the reality is that life is messy. People are messy. People are messy in a very beautiful way, but it's a lot for some people to handle and make sense of when they're trying to manage not only themselves but an entire team. And just how messy are people? Think about it. I have to worry about what's going on internally with me as it relates to the outside world. And emotions drive and influence decisions and behaviors. And emotions are highly volatile and they're shifting all the time, right? And now I have to figure out, say, my team of 10, what's going on in their life and how do I align answers and decisions and support to match what they need. So all these things are important factors that speak to the fact that there's a reason why when you go to a workshop in some instances or you read a book, it's just not scalable because context matters. And as an organization, our business focuses on the concept that we're industry agnostic, but context specific. All right. Because it's what's going on within your team, within your unit. And you know this better than anyone else in your organization because of where you sit in the organization, that this team over here might be highly functional and effective. This team over here might be a little dysfunctional. This team over here, up until a couple of days ago, they were doing great, but something happened, right? And those variables are all sorts of things. So I'm going to jump into this, and our company has a number of different tenants, and our tenants are intended to level set mindset and expectations with people. And today we're talking about performance, talking about organizational performance. In fact, the tool I'm going to share with you is a tool that I developed to help you analyze, diagnose contributing factors that are leading to people's poor performance. And many times we just don't know what we don't know, right? And so this is why part of our practice is based off of integrating our tools. Our tools are science-backed and they work. And they don't solve or fix everything, but what they do is they give you a background of how to get started without ever having to learn the science or the education behind it. So this is one of our tenets. Enthusiasm does not equal competence. I'm curious, anyone have any thoughts as it relates to that? And actually go ahead, turn on your mic if you can, and just share it because my chat screen's disappeared off my screen altogether. Would anyone agree with me that enthusiasm does not equal competence or disagree?
I would
Hi.
agree.
Oh,
Go for it.
Oh, someone else was speaking also. So who was
that
that?
was me. Yes. Hi, I'm Charlie, and let me put on my video
There
there.
you are.
Hello there.
Hi.
I agree. Enthusiasm does not equal competence. As a hiring official, I know that many people are excited to have the level of jobs I may be able to offer. They may be excited about, I'm going to use the word enthusiastic about the pay, the benefits, and all of that good stuff. But unfortunately, it doesn't make a difference how nice and how enthusiastic you are. It doesn't mean that you're competent. And thank you. And I apologize for interrupting Ben.
No, absolutely. Excellent. The limits of our technology when we're not in the same room. And just so you know, this is really hard on me because I am a walker, a pacer. I stand with the crowd. I stand beside them when I present. So this is, my wife gets mad at me all the time when I'm doing these things because I shuffle. So thank you. Ben, go ahead. Your turn.
I was basically going to agree with Charlia. I think I've seen charisma without knowledge in in public speaking, in several aspects. I think it's very possible to be enthusiastic,
Yeah.
but without the knowledge or the experience or the skills to back that up. And I did just want to add a note about time. You have until 12:45 Alaska time,
Oh, 12:45. Okay.
45
Perfect.
your time. So.
Thank you. Anyone have an example without naming people and organizations to share to make this real for us? Okay. All right. So you both are entirely correct according to our belief system in our practice, right? We entered this framework with the assumption that a people are highly motivated when they start their job. When they started their job, they made the decision that the compensation was sufficient. And the motivation is tied to several factors, but three factors I typically talk about. The desire to please oneself to build self-confidence, to feel like they've accomplished something. The second one is to feel good in light of and in the views in the eyes of their family, friends, people in their social network, that they're maintaining a good job and contributing. And the last one that we believe is that they want to make their hiring manager or their supervisor happy with that hire. But one of the challenges and consequences with that comes with this, one, we don't know what we don't know, right? And then another challenge is that we aren't necessarily comfortable advocating or speaking up for ourselves, especially our younger professionals in some instances, where they're uncomfortable with asking questions, like clarifying questions, because they're afraid to be considered uninformed, uninterested, whatever that judgment is, but that's a highly internal judgment, right? Because we've all earned our lumps, right? Haven't we? We've all been through the ringer at some point, and we as compassionate leaders, we want to communicate this and help them understand that, especially at the beginning, no question's a bad question. And let's get you squared away and let's get you going. Our objective, our goal for our organization is to take new employees, year one employees, and develop them purposefully so that they're operating at year two levels of competence. And Ben's going to collect questions, so feel free to throw them into the chat, and we'll routinely stop to see if people have questions as it relates to this. And Ben, by all means, if it's something pressing and clarifying, speak
Will do.
up. All right. So before some of you got here, I mentioned the movie Office Space. If you haven't seen it for a number of years, it's amazing how relevant it still is today with some of the dynamics we see in the organization. All right. So before we jump into this journey of the model and the framework, I want to invite you to consider a couple questions. So identify issues that affect employee performance. Start thinking about this. And if you have something to write down on, go ahead and make some notes, or even put it into the chat. That'd be great too. What are factors or issues that you're seeing in the workplace or previous workplaces that are influencing employees' performance? Just give you a minute to think about that.
So we've got one response from Thomas Wright saying financial stress. We've got from Jarrett Carson, lack of competency, poor morale, lack of effective leadership. We've got a comment about trusting your boss and your team and your company. Kira says job satisfaction. Shauna says work-life balance, financial state, poor communication, bad leadership. We've got from Leah, micromanagement, and from Sarah, lack of resources, procedures, or knowing how to navigate the work environment.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. And would you agree that the same answer is relevant for as it relates to organizational performance, that we could use those same factors?
I certainly would.
Now, think about this and think about your own personal experience and take it down to not the job level, the task level. And what I mean by that, too many leaders supervise at the job level. What they do is they look at the 10 to who knows how many items on the job description that are duties. And many leaders, because they're not trained in our HR frameworks and our understanding, arrive at this assumption that because you got hired, because you made it through the screening process, that you're ready for this job. In fact, many think that you're competent and ready to run. And the reality is that you might be competent in your craft, in your area of expertise, but if you're new to this organization, you're likely not competent as it relates to culture. You're not competent as it relates to the dynamics of the team, which is subsection of culture. You're not competent in terms of maybe technology. Think about when someone introduces a new accounting system, reimbursement system. It's all brand new again. We're learning these things. So bringing someone in, maybe they're a marketing expert from a different firm, we're using a different platform, right? So when you think about your own performance deficiencies and areas where you missed the mark over the years, think about it at that task level, because the best leaders supervise and lead by task, not by job description or by duty line. In fact, they focus on what is the task for, say, this project for the next 2 weeks or next month, and they provide support and reinforcements around that. So think about yourself. What factors have led you to lower levels of performance in the past? Let's go ahead and throw those into the chat again. That was really helpful, Ben, for you to read those out.
So we've got our first answer on this one from Thayer, and that is motivation. I'll speak personally. I know that, there it is, Sally, micromanagement, stealing motivation. I think motivation is going to be a common theme here because that's what was on my mind as well, especially when it comes to micromanagement. I can see that sapping and has sapped my performance over the years. Denise says lack of information or training. Grace says a lack of the right tools to complete each task.
Wonderful. Those are all relevant. And look at that. Just from our small group here, we have so many different variables. And some of the things we didn't think about, someone else put up, and we're like, oh, yeah, I remember that time. Yes, they're right. So let's blow this out to an organization, right? And the people you're supporting in the organization. Look, they're often hired into leadership roles with very limited training, limited preparation, right? They might be an expert in their craft, or they've been around the longest, or everyone else decided not to take the job. So how do we expect the people in our system to navigate all these challenges? So I want you to take one of those items that you identified, and we're going to push it into our model as we move forward. And we're going to see some of them will fit better than others. Like I said, it's not a catch-all or a fix-all, but I think by the time we're done the model and done my pitch, you'll get a sense of how this could be useful in your own organization. Here we go. So this is our peak performance model. The idea here is that we're providing a tool to the leader, to the individual, to diagnose and determine what might be the contributing factors contributing to poor performance or misperformance on a situation. It's a concept I was talking to someone about earlier today called attribution error, another term, fundamental attribution error. Before I explain what that is, think about it from this perspective. Sometimes your managers are too close to the problem to adequately analyze or diagnose what the problem is. Would you agree? Can I get some heads that might nod that sometimes the people that are coming to the office to complain about Fred, who's however they label him, they're just too close, right? So attribution error is this concept where I misattribute the sources of your behavior. So we see it a lot. So a lot of people put motivation in there, and you'll see motivation on this pyramid or this mountain. We have a special session just dedicated to doing the same type of thing in terms of diagnosing motivation to drive motivation as we move forward. That's a different conversation for a different day. But oftentimes when I facilitate out a conversation about motivation, and just say we were all in the same room together, I'd say, let's just do this rapid fire, rapid fire. What motivates you? And people would, actually, let's do it real quick. Throw it in the chat box. What motivates you? Awesome. Lunch, right? Yeah, perfect. All right, you're landing exactly where I want you to land right now. So perfect. Thank you. So then I take a pause and I say, so let's talk about your team. Talk about your staff, your individuals. What do you think motivates them? And I don't want you to put this in there because I don't want you to open yourself up for this one. But what's interesting, I often see these same people that identified all these intrinsic things that you identified, except for lunch, unless it's a social lunch for social reasons, that's intrinsic. But everything else you identified were intrinsic reasons, right? It gives me purpose. I help others. I make a difference. I see outcomes. It's fun, right? So when I ask leaders, say, what motivates your team? They apply attribution error in many instances, too often. And they say, benefits, salary, time off. So they make this assumption that people are motivated, people outside of themselves are motivated by different things. And the error there is that they're moving from intrinsic internal for themselves and now saying that, hey, Ben's motivated by, you know, time off or his paycheck. And at some level, there's some truth to that because we at least have to have enough money to do housing, right? And take care of our needs. But that's an example of attribution error. So this is an example of why managers are often too close to the problem to accurately diagnose it. And so what we've done is we've drummed up this design, we've built this design so that we can help walk them through it. So what's happening here? Okay, we have 3 different levels, as you can see. And what I'm going to do, go ahead and throw questions in the box. But as we go through each level, we'll take pause to see if there's any questions for clarity. So the bottom level is the individual factor, the person factor, the employee factor. All right. And what we're determining here is we're testing that performance issue. So think about the performance issue you've identified for yourself that you had in the past. We're going to run this through this process because some of the performance issues you've indicated, I will venture to guess that you might have misattributed why they're what the factors were that were influencing those performance issues. So let's see how this goes. So the first one's knowledge. So I always use the name Fred. So apologies if someone's a Fred in the audience, if I'm not picking on you. So let's say Fred was not hitting his targets in producing widgets. Okay. And the leaders are frustrated. They don't know what to do with him. And they want to fix this performance issue. So this is how this works. So we get in and we say knowledge. What prerequisite knowledge was needed for Fred to be successful in this position? And oftentimes we see our managers come into our office and say, look, they don't understand or they don't know how to do this job. That's the extent of their diagnosis. The problem here is a little bit twofold. One, we screened Fred, right? We reviewed his minimum qualifications. We checked references. We've interviewed him maybe several times. He might have even had a job talk where he had to present on his expertise. So in that aspect of the knowledge, he checks out. We've already evaluated this on the front end. So we start moving through this path to determine if there's other things. However, you mentioned enthusiasm does not equal weakness. So maybe he isn't fully knowledgeable on the craft that he needs to do here now. So, for example, I had a client that called me and said, Rob, my employee is not competent. We need to do something with her. I said, so let's walk me through what you mean by not competent. And let's just define this real quick for clarity. Competence is the ability to do the job correctly, consistently. Okay, so I said, okay, so explain to me how Gloria's not competent. Well, she's not doing the job. She's making mistakes all the time. There's always errors. I said, okay, give me a little bit more information. How long has Gloria been working with you? 2 years. I said, oh, 2 years. So Gloria has been there for 2 years and she's not competent. And then the CEO said, no, 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 no. 6 months in, she was essentially an expert. She was training everybody on the systems, the practices, the policies. So she was an expert. She just isn't anymore, right? And so what we ultimately determined was that actually she's competent, but something else is going on. So knowledge in this factor here, as it relates to, say, Fred or Gloria, is not a contributing factor to the performance deficiency. So we essentially kind of cover that up, put a little masking tape on your screen if you want. We're not considering knowledge anymore. So how about capacity? What about capacity? Do they have the capacity to do the job? And I'll just use the old-fashioned concept of capacity that we see on job descriptions. That is, you must be able to safely lift 45 pounds, right? So then you could interpret that in terms of capacity by a variety of different crafts, right? So an example I often use, here's another story. I worked with an organization, actually, no, it was my organization. It was an organization I was working in. We had 250 staff. I was over 12 of them. And then it all bled out from there. We ran housing facilities and pieces like that. So one day, someone was embarrassed at the conditions of the facilities. And so what they did was they coordinated our vendor at that time. I don't remember who it was. It was one of these vendors that provides like toilet paper, vacuums, belts, stuff like that. We had one of our vendors come in to take we had, in this situation, we had 10 different custodial managers. They brought the custodial managers in. Average age was probably 47 of the custodial managers. And they had the vendor teach them how to use a vacuum. And how insulting and demoralizing was that? That these people that had been vacuuming as a part of their career for almost ever was now be receiving training from an organization how to vacuum the facilities better. What was determined was that this was not a capacity issue. It's not related to their inability to do the vacuuming correctly. So then what we do is we bring it over and we troubleshoot it in motivation. Same situation. They are not motivated to do the job properly. That's what was claimed by one of the directors. And so what we do is we use our own motivation model. It's a 4-factor model based on 3 inputs. So in order to look at it, we examine motivation. And motivation is just not intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. That is not a helpful framework for us. Our motivation framework based off the science is intrinsic, aligned, imposed, and extrinsic. And those are ranges. And for most of us, we violate things in the imposed category. And our goal is to move those impositions into alignments. Once again, a conversation for another day. Anyways, what we determine, so when we think about you as an employee, what are the things contributing to your motivation? We also know as a part of our model that there's 3 basic psychological needs that influence motivation. And they are competency, which we've already talked about, autonomy, independence, and agency over their work, and relatedness, connection and meaningful relationships with people. And we take that CAR concept, which we call CAR. We have another model that looks at CAR. And we say motivation is diagnosed according to in-work time as well as in-home time, because there's no clear barrier between home and work in many instances. What happens at home in terms of up here in our brains and in our hearts often follows us to work, and vice versa, right? So we use a variety of things to determine that individual level here. So once again, we look, do they have the knowledge? So let's go back to the custodial managers. Do they have the knowledge to vacuum the floors correctly, consistently? Yeah, they have. They've been doing it forever. So it's not a competency issue and it's not a new system issue. Do they have the capacity? Yeah, no one has back problems or shoulder problems or any other capacity related problems, and they know how to do this. Do they have a motivation issue? At the individual level, not so much, if we get into it at that morale level, there's some other things going on there, but that's something different. Through the strictness of the definition, we've ruled out three major factors that relate to performance. That's level one. That's the me level. Questions? Any questions at this point? So there was a question about capacity, I see, and is that too much to do and too little time? Um, well, when we design our job descriptions, right, we have those things baked in and anticipated. So in some instances, it could be a factor that, we've scaled back, we've scaled back, we've scaled back. We keep pushing responsibilities onto other people, and that could be a capacity factor there. But you'll see in a moment that that might actually factor into the next level up above from the organization. Any questions as it relates to that foundational level? So based on my argument, and Ben, I'm just going to talk a little bit more, but you jump in if there is a question there. Based on that foundational analysis, knowledge, capacity, motivation, the vast majority of times people check out being okay in these areas. That it's actually not an individual factor as much as potentially something else. And so this is often where we run into issues, is that Bill's coming in to say, hey, I'm having a problem with, I'm going to pick on Ben now. Ben, and I think he doesn't know how to do the job, or he's lazy, or he's not motivated. And if we handle this model in the strictness of the model with the background education and information we prepare people with, we can go through that and say, you know what? You might have some points at some places, but let's look at this a little closer and really determine what's going on. This typically checks out that most of the time, people are not the problem. The person doing the work is not the sole person responsible for the dysfunction or deficiency. So what do we do next? We go to the next level up. So let's use our custodians again, our managers again. So they're still involved in this conversation, or Ben is still involved as the subject of this conversation. But what we'd start to do is say, what is that problem that Ben has? And what are the tools he needs to do it successfully? If you work in facilities for a company, you know that preventative maintenance is huge. It's super important to preventative maintenance your heavy equipment because the cost to replace them is substantial. That's a common conversation with government agencies, higher education, things like that. What are we doing to preventative maintain the facility so that it's going to last over time? In some instances, we don't have tools. So this is the situation that happened with the custodians. After bringing them in for an hour and a half demoralizing vacuum training session, I decided to take it on my own and go out and try to figure out what was going on. What we learned was that we had one person in the system that actually reported to someone other than me, so I had to dig for this, that the halls and the facilities were not being vacuumed because there were no vacuum bags or replacement belts in stock. The team did not have the tools to do the jobs correctly. And what happened was we were missing that there was this other guy, Tom. He was the bottleneck in the situation. He wasn't performing. So think about this. Oftentimes, performance is really tied to a narrow number of factors, yet some or many leaders kind of address it as an all or nothing phenomenon, right? If Ben is perpetually tardy at work, and you've been in these situations before, you've seen the leader say, look, I'm going to wait till staff meeting and I'm going to address all of you. Just a reminder, work starts at 9, not 9:15, not 9:30. And everyone in attendance, except for Ben, is consistently on time. Yet, what's happening, Ben is very likely not getting the message because what we know about feedback is that it needs to be direct, accurate, and timely. And so what's occurring here is that all the rest of you are watching me tell everyone else that there's a problem when I'm not handling it directly with Ben. And what your leaders are inadvertently doing in your organization, and I want you to pause to think about this, or at least think about this when you leave. Your leaders that are doing this one size fits all mass level of feedback, they are cutting their legs out from under them. What they're inadvertently doing is they're training the audience, training the team to acknowledge that that leader does not have the backbone to handle Ben directly. And you know this better than anyone else, right? You hear this all the time. Oh, I'm always addressing the thing. They need to go. We need to get them out of there. And you know, you follow policies, you follow laws, documentation standards, things like that. And they rarely show up to have done the work they needed to do to exit the employee correctly, right? So once again, here we are. We're looking at tools. Those custodial managers and their entire teams did not have the tools to do the job correctly. Another story I tell is think of it as a quilting company. We all have our responsibility to build a quilt, X number of patches a day. Everybody is hitting the minimum criteria for it except for Ben. Why would I address the whole group and try to retrain the whole group on how to be quicker when Ben is the only issue? And in fact, I can maintain some integrity in both Ben and the system in my relationship with others, that I actually have a conversation with Ben and say, Ben, can you fill me in? Everyone else is hitting their number of 20 a day and you're at 12. What's going on? And what we find out is all the scissors we provided were for right-handed people, and Ben was the only left-handed person on our staff. And so it was uncomfortable, it didn't work, it affected his effectiveness and his efficiency. So this is how we rule out tools. Our tools are all different shapes and sizes and forms for your organizations, and you know your organizations better than me. The middle one, when I started working in this area many years ago, the middle one, information, we would talk about it as it relates to job descriptions. Now I feel pretty confident to say that most organizations have formal job descriptions. But do you remember working, Mary, do you remember working with organizations that, you know, they were just, it was implied what they do. There was no information. So this is also where your onboarding comes in. This is where you provide information for the gaps to help them understand what it is to do the job, what the job looks like, what does high performance, high effectiveness looks like. This is all occurring in this information section. The other thing that's occurring in this information section is probably the number 2 factor to organizational deficiencies we see. And it goes right back to what Jared and I were chatting about before most of you came in here. The concept of feedback. If I'm not providing Ben feedback, frequent, direct, and specific, Ben doesn't know where he stands with respect to his performance, right? After all, no news is good news, isn't it? Right? Like, what else am I supposed to make out of no one's talking to me about a problem? I'm just going to make the assumption that I'm doing okay. But this is where feedback falls in here. And so that is another factor. So if we step back real quick before we get into accountability and we look at this whole diagnosis process, we've gone through knowledge. We determined if the individual has what it takes to do the job successfully. We've reviewed the capacity item. We've crossing these things out. We've removed motivation from the list here. So another way to think about it is the second level, this middle level, is what are the things that are getting in the way by not being there in many instances? The lack of tools, or the lack of effective tools, the lack of information, or the lack of accurate information, right? It's just like if any of you have to run data analysis, you don't have good information coming in, it's hard to generate reports and output for that. Okay, so last item, accountability. This is the number 1 factor, in my opinion, that we are facing with organizations. And it's tied to feedback, And it's this concept of accountability. It is exactly what I mentioned earlier as it relates to I address the whole group and I don't address Ben directly. I am not holding him accountable. And when I hold people accountable, it's kind of like if you ever had a little kid to take bowling, you put those bumper lanes up on the bowling alley. When I hold someone accountable, I pull those lanes up so they can see where they need to exist to be in the safe space. Because the consequence, as I mentioned already, is that people shore up. Even though, despite I said their best intentions and highly motivated day one, at some point I'm going to say enough is enough for me busting my hump for this group if if other people are going to be allowed to get away with X, Y, and Z. And what we eventually see, and it's the demise of this team, is that, well, if Ben is late for work and he continues to be late for work and no one's addressing it, and I'm going to pick on Summer now because she's right below Ben on my screen, that now Summer's like, I'm gonna take a little longer lunch on Friday afternoon since no one's doing anything about Ben. And then if everyone takes a little liberties on their own here and there, what happens with the organization? We have total chaos because we're not skilled or comfortable in having difficult conversations. Or we don't have a system that structures it well to train us to develop us and to deliver it. Or we haven't gotten to the top level yet. We haven't established a culture that normalizes difficult conversations, increases drips of frequency, and leans into each other to say, look, I got your back. I'm here for you. So what's happening on the top here? Actually, before I go to the top, any questions on that middle line? Mary, that was you. Surprised to get feedback in a timely manner, right? That's what I hear from my students sometimes. They're like, hey, no other professor's ever given me feedback on a paper. You're doing it all the time. It's because it's the right thing to do. And I know, and I'm sure you know and feel this way, if I'm not doing the job correctly, I want to make changes to correct it. We used to do this thing, an annual conference with 150 students in the woods for a week at retreat centers. And one of the concepts we had was feedback equals love. Feedback is a sign of respect. And I want to be respected just like every single one of you wants to be respected. It doesn't mean that feedback doesn't sting. I'll be the first to admit it. I beat myself up over it. I don't sleep the next couple days after. But it's crucial, and 9 times out of 10 it's accurate. I hope Angie's not on here still listening to this. And 9 times out of 10 it's accurate because I needed to know this. And the person on the other end wasn't delivering it to be a jerk. They weren't trying to hurt me, right? I want to give you feedback because I care for you. I care about your well-being, and I see that you're an important member on this team. So what we're doing overall here is we're creating these conditions for our team members to flourish. Any questions at this point? Yeah, so is it Ellen? I see that the onboarding occurring on a computer, right? And I would even challenge, what is the nature of that onboarding? Is it policy, benefits, EAP, stuff like that, handbook, like stuff that, I'll be careful here. I don't want to insult someone, but we spend too much time on the transactional items that are of less importance to people. Of course, they want to know day one that they have benefits and how they could use their benefits for healthcare, their time off, stuff like that. Day one, most people aren't interested in EAP, so they'll probably forget about it until they need it, and then they're going to call you back later to figure that out. What's more important in your onboarding process is socialization and integration and norming culture. And these are things that need to be structured in a purposeful way to help people flourish, help people fulfill that basic psychological need of relatedness in the workplace so that they feel like they belong to something. Because we've all been there before. It's rough, right? Being the new person. Sometimes we've been in organizations and they do a really nice job, real seamless. But if you're like me that's bopped around in higher ed, every time I come to a new community, I have to reintegrate with people. And they all have their own socialization groups, social groups, friends, stuff like that, family. And I'm always the outsider. And that's tough. And our employees are experiencing the same thing, even if they didn't have to relocate to take this job. All right, I want to jump to the chat there. Anything come up there, Ben, that you think's noteworthy that we should touch base on?
I think you've done a fantastic job of answering questions and commenting on things as people bring them up.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so culture, my favorite place to be, right? Uh, my flatlanders in the Midwest where I came from don't necessarily recognize the reference, but us that live in the mountains, right? You got that ice, that snow cap at the top, and as that melts, that water touches everything below, right? That's part of the reason we get those spring blooms is from the water coming off that snow cap, right? Your culture is your snow cap, is your ice cap. And it's either going to help or hinder you in every single one of these categories. And we'll just pick on one in particular, accountability. If I have a high trust, feedback rich culture, where in some instances, and some of you missed this conversation with Jared, I flatten the leadership power differential so I'm with my people instead of over my people, so that they feel like they're part of the decision-making authority when I want them to feel like they're a part of that. I can go in and have a difficult conversation with Ben, and I'm not saying it's not going to sting, but he knows I have his back. Quick story, and then we'll get into a little bit of a dialogue. So I had this employee. This was also on that I Need to F and Talk to You podcast. And it's a pretty fun podcast. You could hear all about my mistakes and blunders. So I was living in Iowa, and I moved to Michigan, and I end up on the Upper Peninsula. So really remote area of Michigan in and of itself. And we had a hard time hiring people. I had a friend back in Iowa that worked with me, and he was having a hard time in the job market. He wasn't finding jobs, wasn't having opportunities, wasn't successful. I said, Travis, why don't you join me? Why don't you come out to Michigan? You know, it's like me test driving a car, right? Or having an intern. I know what they're capable of. I know what it does. I know if I can lean and rely on him. So Travis takes the job. Over time, and we'd have lunches frequently together. Over time, I noticed Travis starting to complain more and more and more. And what he would talk about, and this is a university job, he would say, which we're not known for making much in universities, right? So, but he'd keep complaining, well, Creighton was paying this and Drake was paying that. Um, and, you know, all these different universities where he interviewed were paying this, that, and that. And I finally had enough of it. I was really frustrated hearing that. I didn't want us to dwell on this negative when we actually have an opportunity because we have a job. So I said, Travis, how many of those people offered you a job? And he was so pissed off. He got up and stomped out of the restaurant, didn't come back. Next day, he came back. He said, Rob, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. And so basically, I had culture on my side. I had the relationship base. He knew I loved and respected him as a colleague, and he knew I was looking out for him. And it made the world of difference in having those difficult conversations. It's the same thing. It's the grease to the gears for the organization to press on and tackle an obstacle before a deadline. But it's also the complicating factor that's going to get you into a lawsuit or have hard feelings with people when you don't have culture on your side. I'm not saying culture is going to lawsuit proof you. It's not true, but there's a lot less chances for misunderstanding when we have culture, when we're having these drips of feedback. So one of the things I mentioned to Jared, how I'd structure my one-on-ones was that every week we'd share an agenda. Ben would work through the top of the agenda. Then Ben had feedback for me opportunity. And that was about team dynamics. That was about what he needed, what he was experiencing, things he's observed, things that aren't landing right for our culture, all that stuff. And there was no retribution, high psychological safety. And then I would give Ben feedback, drips of positive and constructive feedback. And so if you don't have that integrated into the culture, you don't have the gears and the grease in those gears. And it's just a matter of time before you burn your people up. All right. I wanted to leave enough time for questions. Any thoughts or questions? Did this help you as you thought about what some of your performance things were maybe related to this? And then you're like, oh, That's a good point. I didn't really think of it that way. Reactions, thought, should I take this on the road or what?
Did you ever kind of associate this also with kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory? In
So, yeah, I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, those Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What I actually do is when I do my motivation session and my motivation work, I lay over the current science of motivation pushes back a little bit on Maslow's. And so this it's just purely coincidental in terms of the stacking of this, but you are talking about higher order factors here, going from the self to the organization to the culture. So I appreciate that question. But the little thing that people don't realize is there's some improvements we can make on Maslow's, and that's what I've done when we talk about that is how do we improve on that? But so it's just more of a coincidence, but it stacks in a matter very similar. Good comment. Anyone else?
Rob, I think these are excellent ideas. In my experience, though, all the good things that I want to do, I don't do unless there is structure that guides me in that direction. That we've got to have, maybe it's metrics, accountability, or something that motivates me. For example, working out, I know I should do it, but I'm more likely to do it if the place I work out is between my office and my home than if it's going to be a different route. Do you have some ideas on how in our work and in our companies we can look for that structure and strengthen it?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts. Who's prioritizing this, right? So it hurts my heart at times. I work with organizations and the top crust thinks that they don't need the work and then they just delegate it to divisions or units, right? Uh, our preferred partnership with organizations is that that top group is the role model and they adopt and endorse the language of the tools for our practice. And once we do that, and if they are truly committed and we're working on having honest conversations with them, we're creating space for people to have these conversations, to experience this. So our goal is at the end, we work ourselves out of the job. That our goal is that all of you, after you've been through all the stuff, now Ben's having an issue and Ben comes to Summer and says, I don't know what to do about Fred. Summer says, let's pull out his model. Let's pull out some of his personality documents that we talked about and start to determine where Ben is. So we're creating this co-teaching, co-coaching framework so we integrate it and normalize it. We talk about it in terms of annual or annual staff meetings. No, please no. Monthly or whatever that frequency is carving out time specifically for development. And I have to remind myself, this is what I do. This is what I get geeked out about. And people don't understand what that means or what that looks like. But your people, as we know, and you know, if you can offer more enriching value-added experiences, and I'm not talking about sending them to conferences. Sending people to conferences is actually, in my experience, has a very low ROI. Instead, what we do is we work with organizations to pull back some of those funds to designate towards culture and organization work to get people on the same page. And I'm not saying conferences are bad. Conferences have their time and place. That's all I'm saying. So, you know, a weekend in Vegas is $5,000. A week in Vegas is $5,000 probably for one of you to go down there to a conference. What's the return on that expense there, right? So what we try to do is reframe the thinking to see where our opportunities are to integrate. Another thing we run into, I remember starting out with some clients and we often start out with some real baseline stuff, a full day event, and they're like, we got 45 minutes for you. I was like, what do you mean you got 45 minutes for us to do this? And so we eventually get them where we need to get them. But the concept of this scarcity of time and that we're all so busy, like if you've ever looked at my LinkedIn, you'll see stuff that we don't have time not to set aside time to do stuff like that. It's kind of like self-care. We can't afford not to slow down to take care of ourselves because it's going to catch up with us at some point. So, you know, long answer to a simple question, Mary, that we need to be very purposeful on how we integrate. We need to steward these outside expenses of people like us and others and yourself as investments and treat them like investments so that we integrate them into practice. We role model it at the leadership level. We use the language. We are one step ahead of people. So I was doing this workshop once, and goals were a part of it. Interesting story. And the guy said, I can't even think of goals. They're so far off. I could barely get through my day-to-day work. And that's part of the problem, is that we haven't created the system for people to be self-sufficient, to create space, to create time, and then to plan accordingly. Because in that instance, I want Jared to say, look, let's use these tools to help figure out this problem, not just what we've done or haven't done in the past, right? Because people lead in a manner that they've learned. We are the body of all of our inputs and lenses, right? Education, experiences, all these different things. People lead according to what they get inserted. And that could be, and for most of our people, it's good leadership practices and bad leadership practices. And my concern about good leadership practices is that sometimes people aren't attuned enough to notice that that good leadership practice is actually not the practice, but the dynamics of the team. It's context specific. So that's where we want to try to help people integrate those things.
I think we have a good example of one of our members who fairly recently went into a job and did something about that feedback cycle. Jared, if you're here, can you give us a quick once over on how you moved it from that annual evaluation to
excellent. It's a great example.
Discussion?
Well, it's even worse than that. When I got here, there were no evaluations of any kind, even the annual. So what we did was, let's go back to the knowledge. They brought me in to be the director of people and culture. So they saw that I had the knowledge, the capacity, and I was motivated to bring that to the organization. They were also motivated to have that here. So I've never been part of an organization where you come in and say, hey, you currently don't do any evals. Let's get you on a monthly. And they all accepted it. So they already had the tools in place. They had a great system, a program that they used to create those connections. And then what I did was I said, hey, if I give this to you, how do I make it easier for you? So each one of them was held accountable for giving me that feedback to say, hey, how do we make this even better? So I said, hey, if these guys work on construction sites, they have to be able to do it from their phones. They can't go to a computer. They can't go to a tablet. They have to be able to do this in 15 minutes a month on their phones. I made the questions very simple that can go across all teams, and it's the same feedback. So then when we get to the culture, my title is Director of People and Culture. So they made it a point that this wasn't an HR role. This is a culture role. How do we increase the culture and the desire to improve the organization from the base level forward? So then I go in and I actually give each person, I read every evaluation that's written, across 34 people. I read all of them and then I give people feedback. Hey, if you're going to give your supervisor feedback and you want to tell them how you're doing, add a little more to this. Tell them a little more about your story. They may not see it. Hey, as the supervisor, tell them what they said, what it makes sense to you, what it means to you. Let's add a little more to it. So it's tell me what you did. Tell me what you think you should do next evaluation. Tell me what is your strength, what is your area of improvement, and then what else do I need to know that maybe we didn't talk about? So I give them enough points that they can expand on it. And if they want to get a little deeper, they can. But if they're trying to just get to the next piece, it's still enough information that the supervisor can write a very good evaluation. And then we actually go into our writing correspondence class of like, hey, write with a purpose, write about an action, write about the impact of that action, and tell me, can I measure that result? So it then creates connections between everybody. And then I created it very similar to the Army structure, where there's a rater, a reviewer, or a rater, senior rater, and then a reviewer, so that everybody's getting feedback loop from that evaluation.
Awesome. Jared, there was a question in the chat. What platform are you using for feedback?
I'll put it in there and take it off this message.
Cool.
It's called 15.5, and I don't recommend doing their full service. Just do the platform. And if anybody ever gets into 15.5 and wants my help in building out what your monthly performance reviews would look like, I can 100% help you. I do a lot with them now, but I found that it's one of the best platforms out there. to do, performance tracking. They even do weekly check-ins. Where you can ask every team member a weekly check-in just to kind of check up on how they're doing. You can set them on different cycles to be every 2 weeks, every month. You can actually set it up to be cyclic where it's like, hey, after somebody's 30 days of being onboarded, you can ask onboarding questions after 30 days. Hey, how was your onboarding experience? Hey, how was your first 90 days? How was your first year? So there's a lot of really cool things that come with it. I've been working with their development team um, to try to make the program even better than it is today. So they found out that I was doing my doctorate in performance management, and they're like, "Hey, can you give us some tips?" And I'm like, absolutely. So I actually love the platform. It does great work, and it's relatively cheap for even small companies, but easy to implement even in larger scale.
Well, thank you. Mary, shall I wrap it up with this right here? Okay, so here's our contact information. Find us on LinkedIn. Angie's link is on there too. So to give you a little background on us, Angie is our self and team expert on our team. So she does a lot of self work, self development. She's our go-to person for training as it relates to certain personality and behavioral aspects. And then I tend to pick it up at that team level and organizational level. Go check us out. Connect with us on LinkedIn. If you ever want to connect and just have a conversation for some feedback, bounce some ideas off me, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on Black River in there. Our models. So you saw this one model. There's a handful more models on that models page. And then at the end, we always offer this when we do these talks that if you haven't done a self-assessment recently that looked at your communication practices and preferences and your drivers and behavioral preferences, leadership development competencies, your leader competencies, feel free to scan that QR code and go ahead and complete that. If for whatever reason it kicks you off your phone, and you want to do it at a later date, just shoot me an email at the email at the top of the page. But hey, thank you to everyone. And Mary, thank you. And Ben, thank you. I really appreciated this. It's been great getting to know you. As I mentioned to them when we first got in, we got word that we will be back in Alaska for sure, a couple weeks before the NERMA conference, as well as out to Sitka and stuff over the summer, most likely. So we have people that want us to come back up there, and we'd love to stop by and chat if you're around.
Rob, we would absolutely love that. And I want to thank you for your time in speaking to our members today. Also, thank you, Angie, for joining us. Happy to have you here. And for everyone that was on the presentation today, thank you for your time and your attention and your responsiveness in the questions. We so appreciate this opportunity to work together. You'll see displayed on the screen now your PDC certification, and I will hand it over to Mary.
Thanks, Ben. If we know that you're here, you will be getting an email after this presentation with this certification in it. And you can take a screenshot right now if you need those numbers. I will show those numbers one more time before we end, but we do have a few final announcements before everyone gets back to their regularly scheduled day. First of all, if you did not have the opportunity to bring your points into the survey, we announced an open survey on the new Alaska Paid Sick Leave Act that we all get to put into place in the middle of the summer here. And so we have a URL and a code, a UR code here that you can go to this survey and help us know what our speakers who are coming up should talk about that will help you get ready for that implementation, and so that you're sure that you're going to be within the law and doing it well to the best of the needs of your company. So please, if you haven't completed that survey, take a few minutes and do it. Help us define the main points. Then get registered on the SHRM site, the ASHRM site, for 2 events, which will be our March program. The first one is going to be on Tuesday, the 18th, and that's our regular meeting. We will be in person at the BP Energy Center, And this part will look at that Alaska Paid Sick Leave Act from the legal side. And, this is a pretty big topic. We figured we couldn't get it done in an hour. So we have partnered with the Payroll Association and LAC chapter to offer a second day with the part of this presentation that needs to come to us from DOL. Now, look carefully because you will see I really do not have the DOL speaker's picture here. This is to see if you all are still paying attention. But we do have two people who will be coming from DOL to this particular program and talk about their requirements and how that is going to affect your payroll system. Now, NLAC, as a partner, has done something very special for us. If you get signed up and you see this on our website as the second part to sign up, they would like to invite us without a second charge. So please put this on their schedule, find out what NLAC does, help to support them by being in this session, and then you will have information from both the legal side and from what we really need to do to get the job done on payroll and meeting DOL's requirements for reporting. If you look very carefully, that registration code is at the bottom of this screen. Ben, is that what you're about to point out?
I was. It's just behind your head. So I will put it, there you go. I will put it in the chat.
Thank you.
But this is listed on our website as part 2. So absolutely, please, it's a great opportunity that they're, not asking for anything extra. They're partnering with us on that. So please go sign up for that.
And I think they register in the non-member guest ticket option. Isn't that right?
Yes. And there's a special code, which I have put in the chat.
Thank you so much. Okay. A couple of final points. When you belong not only to SHRM, but to ASHRM, there are member benefits that you get for that dual membership. And one of these is the opportunity to get involved, to do something that might be close to your heart, someplace that you will feel that you are really treasured for the time that you put into it. And that is to volunteer on leadership, on committees, on doing things and getting active. You see that we have the link there for you. This is the volunteer page on our website. And if you can't find it immediately, there's that little 3-line hamburger sort of thing that says more. All of these pages are going to show up under there. Second one is we are opening the Spring Mentor Mentee program, and you might want to be one or the other or both. A friend of mine once said to me, one of my mentors, you're in balance when you can tell me the name of your mentor and who you are mentoring, that it takes both sides. The last link that you see is where we can list jobs. You can seek jobs there, you can post jobs there, and if you are a dual member of SHRM and ASHRM, you get to post jobs for your company on that site at no additional cost. So take a look, see what you can use in your member benefits. And if you're not sure that you are truly a dual member, Christine Brown is the head of membership this year, and she'd be really happy to verify that with you. We've got 2 databases, one at SHRM and one here, and the 2 don't speak. So it's a little bit of a process to get that done. So please check on that. And the fun thing, even remotely, we do a door prize. Now, while I talk about this door prize, I want you to notice the QR code on the side of the screen. I trust I'm not in front of that, Ben. Am I okay?
You are good.
Okay, so this is where you can go directly to feedback about today. We want to know how this worked for you, what we could have done better, what you'd like to see us do. Meanwhile, I put my hand in the fishbowl over here and drew out 2 names for winners of today's door prize. And first of all, folks who are winners of the door prize, let us know if you're going to be at that March meeting so that we can hand deliver that. Our winners today are Noni Rathman and Julie Sidoris. So come to the next meeting and see what little surprise that we have sitting aside for you. The rest of us can all think about our own companies and getting the opportunity to bring our company's names to this membership. So Nicole Culbertson is in charge of sponsorships if you would like to sponsor one of these meetings, which might mean that you are the provider of lunch at our group meetings, or maybe you're the source of the door prizes, would you please get in touch with Nicole or myself and come forward? It makes it a lot more fun when we've got something a little different and an opportunity to thank your boss, your company, our local industries. So as we wind up, I just want to say, here are the numbers once again. If you didn't get a screenshot off that first one, thank you. We're really appreciative. I do hope that you follow us on all the social media. And if you did sign up today, we will be sending you, and if we know you're here, so be sure your name is in the chat. We will send you that follow-up notice so that if you would like to review Rob's words again, that link will be in our thank you note to you, along with the request for your feedback, and that you can review. We're hoping Rob will be selected to come back. As you know, NERMA is going to be having its annual conference for the first time in 10 years in Alaska. And if we're fortunate, you might be able to sign up to do a longer workshop with them and actually get to interact with some of these tools. Well, we're coming very close to the end. Before we do finish, I want to see if there's any other announcement or anything that anyone would like to share today that you didn't get into the chat. Last comments? Ben, be watching for hands.
I'm keeping my eyes out.
Okay, we're going to call it the end of the meeting. We will stay live for 4 more minutes. You get 4 more minutes back if you need to run to the next meeting. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you again next month.
Thank you again, Dr. Leon, for speaking with us.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And thank you, Mary.
Glad you were here today.
I'll see you soon.
Okay.
So I thought I'd just stick around for a moment and just
Sure.
wrap it up and hear any thoughts you might have.
Let me come over to finishing the recording.